Good morning. So glad to be here on another Thursday at 11 for another segment of Stronger and Better. I see people are starting to come in already. And so please let me know that you're here. We got an exciting show and we have an exciting guest on today who's going to really bless us in terms of us talking about our mind and really our perspective of life and how we should be dealing with things. But make sure you say hello to me as you're coming in. Please make sure that you're sharing this with people. Make sure you're doing watch parties or sharing and getting people stronger and better as we go through this time together. I love each one of y'all. Glad to see each one of y'all. Come on, y'all say hello to me as y'all are coming in. Please, as always, make sure that you go to the YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button. Good morning, Paula. How are you? It's always good to see you on the show every week. Glad to have you with us. I'm going to go ahead and put the subscription to the YouTube page in the chat so everyone can get it. I see others are starting to come in. Please make sure, like I said, you are sharing this. And we're going to start our conversation in a few minutes. Let me make sure that I'm sharing this. Today is a great week, and I'm excited about, like I said, what we're going to be talking about today. Hey, good morning, Mrs. Bailey. Miss Rosa Bailey, good to see you on today. Glad to have you here with us. I see others are coming in. Please make sure that you're saying hello to me. Let us know that you're here. And we want, as always, you to join into the conversation, ask your questions, and make sure that you are interacting with us as we go along. And a little later in the show, I'm going to put the private number up so you can ask your private questions if you have private questions. Good morning. I still see people starting to come in and join the show on today. We got them coming in. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. So I don't want to wait too long because I want to go ahead and bring our guest in, and I want to bring her to the platform. Good morning.
Good morning, Pastor Leroy.
How are you?
I am doing good. I really am. Thank you for asking. I hope you as well.
I am. I'm doing great. We had some great weather here this weekend. For us to get 80 degrees right now on yesterday, we're real happy.
It's gonna get hotter, right?
Right. We're real happy. We're real happy. So I want to start the show off if you can kind of tell us about yourself and what you're doing now, and just give us a quick synopsis of who you are.
I would love to share. Thank you for having me. Good morning or afternoon, whatever time of day you're listening. I am Natalie Warren. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I am a mindset coach. And ultimately, what I get to do is really help people to step into their greatness. And
Yeah.
that is by helping them to clear out anything that is impacting them from doing that so they truly can be who they were intended and created to be. And so I get to do that in so many ways, but that is the gist of who I am and what I do.
Yeah. So everyone, I got a chance to see her on Apostle Lysandra's show. And I was in the background listening. I was like, some of the stuff she was saying was like, wow. So I had to get you to come on my platform so our people can hear what you had to say. And I want to just start this conversation out just talking about the mind and how it operates. And so if you can kind of give us an elaboration of how the mind operates and how it affects our lives.
Ooh, you got us talking about something I love to talk about. Um, the mind is so, I think, so amazing. One of the most amazing things I think God gave us.
Yeah.
And in understanding that, it's very complex.
Right.
Most people don't really understand the mind, and it controls everything.
Right.
It controls how we think, how we feel, how we act, how we respond. And so, in understanding or having a better understanding of your mind, you really can, I believe, change your life and really, really move through things that could hold you back. And so, the mind is, like I said, it's very complex. Most of us don't know, but on a daily basis, you have about 65,000 thoughts. And so, Pastor Leroy,
That is great.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And most of them we're not even aware of. And so, of the 65,000 thoughts that when we talk about the mind, 75% of those thoughts are negative.
Wow.
75%. And of the 65,000 thoughts, 90% of those thoughts are thoughts that we thought yesterday. So each day we tell ourselves we're waking up to a new day and we have all these new opportunities. But the
Yeah.
truth is, our mind is just recycling old thoughts, old beliefs, old experiences. And so when we don't know that, right, and these thoughts are coming so quickly each day, we're just really living on autopilot, really just going from one day to the next.
So 65,000 thoughts.
Yes,
And you said 75% are negative.
are negative.
So why do you think that we connect to the negative aspects of those thoughts, or our thoughts are negative instead of them being positive?
The way the mind is really made, and it's been studied, a lot of research has gone into it, it tends to just find the negative.
Right.
So, an example is if you have an experience and you look at it through the lens of what we all do, right? We look through it our lenses. A lot of the times the mind is tend to lean negative, and so it will look for evidence to support something that's negative, right? So you
Right.
think, someone didn't speak to me, the mind is going to think of all the negative reasons why that didn't happen. And
Right.
then it will look for evidence to support that, right? So, yeah, remember last time she didn't speak to you? Or you remember the last time the five people in the restaurant didn't look at you? Like the mind just will pull out all of these pieces. And because we're so unaware of it, then we just kind of fall into those patterns with not understanding that we can change it. We really can change that.
So how do we change those negative thoughts, or how do we connect with them to make ourselves better in terms of the way we think? Because if we are on autopilot,
Mhm.
how do we take ourselves off of autopilot and gear towards changing that?
Great question. And you answered it with your question.
Oh, did I?
A part of what we have to do, and here's the challenge, a part of it, what we have to do is we have to slow down. We
Yeah,
have to slow down. And we live in a very busy world that's always telling us to do more, to have more, to be more. And it puts us on this cycle where we're really moving too quickly. Because those 65,000 thoughts are coming very quickly, even as we're listening into this, right? We're all having thoughts. All these thoughts are
yeah,
coming up. Slowing down is really one of the ways to do it. So you can process those thoughts.
yeah,
The idea is what happens with the thoughts that we have, we don't remember all the 65,000 thoughts.
right.
The ones that we remember are the ones that we give meaning to, or the ones that we attach an emotion to. Those are
Yeah,
the ones you remember. And if you think about your childhood, most of the stuff you remember is because you gave it meaning
yeah,
or there was a strong emotion attached to it.
yeah,
And so the idea is slowing down gets you in the process of being able to do that. But the other thing that happens is a lot of the times we're just so out of touch with our thoughts and our feelings. It's just the way we're conditioned. And if you've had trouble or challenges in your life, the brain actually causes you to forget those things to protect you, to keep
yeah,
you alive, to keep you from dealing with very challenging and sometimes traumatic things. So the brain blocks it out. People will say it all the time. I don't even remember it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the truth. Like the brain has a compartment that protects us. And so it tends to help you to forget those things. So slowing it down and then being aware of your thoughts, it can be a little overwhelming. I'm going to tell you that. It can be a
Right,
little
right.
overwhelming, but it can be life changing. And what you'll hear is, say, for instance, you have the thought that I can't do something, right? I'll never be able to do it. If you paid attention to that thought, you will see how it's recycled in different ways. Maybe it'll be, you know what, no good things happen to me, or I'm not sure if I can do this. Maybe we might even say, God, maybe God doesn't want me to do this, right?
Right, right, right. We blame God.
All of these thoughts, but the root of it is the same, this idea that maybe I can't do something.
Yeah.
So I really challenge people to really log your thoughts. Pay attention to those dominant ones that show up often, and that's one of the ways to change it.
I never thought about logging my thoughts. That's an interesting concept. That's a lot of thoughts to log, 65,000.
Well, again, remember, you're not going to remember them all. You're only going
Yeah,
to remember the ones that have meaning to them
meaning.
or emotion. And so you can track those pretty easy because remember, they're 90% are the same thoughts. So you're going to find the pattern. It's going to be fairly easy if you're patient to find the pattern and be able to say, this same thought is showing up in a different way. And I'll share more about my own personal experiences to help. But yes, sometimes it really helps to just monitor them and write them down.
Well, let me ask you something because we do forget about some thoughts, but there's some thoughts that or traumatic situations that happen in our life that we do remember. Why is that, and how do you get over that?
It can be challenging. It can be challenging. Remember what I said about how the mind works. So the mind ends up keeping what we call like computer files in your brain, right? And this is the beauty of it. I see it as the awesomeness of God. So every time you see this little post-it, right?
Yep, yep, yep.
You can see that. Or I'll give you something that's a little darker, the pen.
Yep, yep.
Every time you see a pen, you never have to say to yourself, what is that? Because the mind, the brain, and I'll use the words interchangeably, they store it in your brain, right? There's a place that pens are stored, no matter what color they are. They could be green, purple, yellow, orange.
Yeah.
But every time you see it, the mind says pen.
Yeah.
So it creates pathways, is what we call that. So that every time something comes up, you're not thinking, what is that? How do I do that? Well, the same thing works when we have things that are negative or traumatic. The brain starts to register, this looks like such and such. So then it puts it into that file. And then every time you see that thing, it says, oh, this is that, which sometimes is not true. And that's where we have to retrain our brains because it could be pulling up an old file, something
Yeah.
that's not what it was. And that's the challenge.
Yeah. So a lot of times on the show, we talk about relationships. We talk about, even getting our finances together and, or, even our spiritual walk. And what we noticed is that through these conversations, a lot of the way we operate today is because of what we've gone through in our past. And as a mind coach, some of those stamps that are imprinted in our brain, just like you was talking about. I know that's a pen. It's almost that there's a stamp in our brains of certain behaviors or types that we attach ourselves to, or behaviors that financially we spend more, or in a relationship, that guy or that woman's not the right one for you, but we keep going back to it.
Yeah.
We keep doing it over and over. So can you kind of express how, the way we think, our mind, and how that affects, not only, our daily walk, but our relationships, our finances, the way we operate day to day with individuals, our work behavior. Can you talk about that?
Yes. And I'll start with money because I know that's what people want to talk about, right? And then I'll talk about relationships. And so we all have money stories. We all have money beliefs. And the truth is we all have money trauma.
Yeah.
The experiences that we saw, the things that we were told, the lack of money really creates an imprint. This is what happens in the brain. And so because of that, we live out of those underlying fears.
Yeah.
We live out of those underlying expectations and those stories about money. And so I did my own personal work. I'm one that's in the field of personal development, so I believe in it. And I realized, Pastor Leroy, probably about 7 years ago, I had a poor relationship with money. And I needed a divorce. Like I literally,
a lot of us do.
I had to let this thing go. And I had to do a lot of work because what I found was in these belief systems that I had a lot of judgments around people who had money. I thought that they were lazy. I thought, what was the use of them having, people do things for them? They can do it themselves. Because my mom told me growing up, when we asked for a dishwasher, it was I had two siblings. My mom said to us, I have 3 dishwashers. Why do I need a dishwasher? Right. And so those beliefs and those stories created some judgments that I had to work through in regards to money because I thought that they were greedy, that they were stingy, that they were selfish. And clearly anything that you judge, you will never want to be it. Yeah. And so because I realized I was judging it because of the stories and the beliefs, I had to let that stuff go and realize that it was creating some insecurities within myself. Wow. So in that work, understanding that really helped, but changing that mindset around money was huge. And I still do the work because, as I've said to you, we have these beliefs, and sometimes those beliefs can be very embedded in our brain, can be very embedded. But relationships is another big hot topic. Obviously, everyone wants a healthy relationship and sometimes ask themselves, why do I find myself doing the same thing?
Yeah.
One of the things is the way the mind works is, especially if it was a traumatic or not even traumatic, an unhealthy relationship you saw modeled for you,
Mm.
the brain will try to recreate that whole pattern. Now, it doesn't realize it's not good for you.
Right,
Um,
right.
and so, whether you're consciously aware of it or not, you will either by default try to recreate what you saw, whether it was healthy or unhealthy, because that's just the way the mind works. So, yes, it impacts every area of your life.
Yeah. So you talked about even in those situations or those few examples, how others could impact you.
Mhm.
And so, how do we not allow others to impact us in a negative way versus the positive way? How do we allow that, the knowledge to get in there, but to dump the garbage?
The garbage. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you, by the time we realize we need to dump we're a little behind the clock. Why
Yeah.
is that? The programming from our minds that we all typically operate under is from 7 years old and under.
Wow.
7 and under. So you're already a little behind the clock by the time you realize, oh my gosh, everybody has influenced the way I think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why I really encourage people to do personal development work. That is why counseling and coaching is so vital, because the programming has been pretty set by the time you're 7. And you're just living out the world from the experience of that 7-year-old and below. But how do you change it? That's your
Yeah.
question. There is
Yeah.
hope. There is hope. You can change it. And it really takes an intention to, first and foremost, understand your mind, because the truth is nobody teaches you about your mind.
Right. Right.
And the mind is so complex that it tries to protect you from even understanding and changing it.
Yeah.
The moment you start trying to mess with this stuff, your mind is like, what are you doing? What's going on? Why are you bothering it?
Yeah.
And so it becomes a really challenge. But being intentional and understanding it, taking the necessary steps to get support to really work through these patterns, which is, again, why I encourage personal development, because a lot of it you can't do by yourself. You are blinded. You have blind spots, is what we call them, and that you won't see them on your own.
Yeah. It raises a question, even talking about raising children, and those first 7 years, like what should parents be doing to impact the kid from those ages of 0 to 7, to make sure that their life is not projected in a negative way?
Great question. And I have young kids, so I'm mindful of it. I try to be mindful. I think what helps a parent is you have to start questioning everything that you do. So for an example, with my son, he's now 8, I kept realizing he was picking up my messages of you're wasting, right? So I would say, honey, you're wasting food. Why are you wasting that paper? He picked up a belief that he was wasteful. And so with his money, you know what he does? He holds it. He's not spending it. We go to the store, she's gonna spend all her money, and he's like, nope, I'm not spending a dime. And so in that, I had to realize that I was teaching him something. Was that my intention to teach him to not be wasteful? Was that my intention to teach him that? So as a parent, I now have to question everything. Why am I teaching him this? Where did this even come from? Like,
Yeah.
why do we wash clothes on Saturdays? Is that a
Yeah.
rule, or is that just something that somebody else
Right.
told you to
Right.
do?
Right. 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 Right.
Questioning a lot of those things will help you to start to open your mind as a parent to say, what is it that I want them to get? And then you start to teach and do something different.
No, that's good. That's good. We did have a question that came up, and it says from Miss Daniels. It says, "Is there a way to identify any patterns in my behavior that is attracting the negative?"
Great question. Is there a way to identify it? One of the things I would say is First of all, see what you are attracting that you don't want. See what you're attracting that you don't want. And again, some of this is on a conscious level, but the truth is, what's really running our lives is our subconscious mind, right? That's the part of
Yeah.
our life that we're really not aware of. But in that, seeing what am I attracting? What is it that I want that I'm not getting? And then in that, you start to ask yourself, well, what is it that I am potentially doing or thinking that could be impacting that? So I can't
Mm.
say that I want to impact the world, right? That's a
Right.
dream or vision that many people have. But then I'm also procrastinating,
Yeah.
right? Or afraid of putting myself out there. So then I would be looking at what are the behaviors, what are the things that I could be doing that is not giving me what I want. And a lot of it is things that you'll be aware of. But as I mentioned, some of those things, unfortunately, you just won't know.
Yeah, yeah. Good question. Thank you for the question. So please, if you have questions or we want you to interact with us, so please put your questions in the thread. You'll see the number also at the bottom of the screen if you have a private question. But I want to talk about, I know especially since COVID, um, that a lot of people are falling into depression.
Mm.
Whether that's not being able to socialize like they used to, or the loss of job, finances. How does our mind play a role in depression?
Great question. Great question. I do want to acknowledge that there are a lot of people who are having challenges,
Yeah,
and some people aren't even able to identify that it is depression, but for many it is. And for me in the profession that I'm in, my colleagues and I have been inundated with people needing support. So I definitely agree that that's happening.
yeah,
One other thing that I want to make mention of before we talk about depression in the mind is some of what's happening with just COVID alone is
yeah,
that COVID has brought forth things that were there that we weren't aware
yeah,
of
yeah,
or
yeah,
we could avoid, right?
yeah,
And it brought it to the forefront. And so that's also one of the challenges why people are reporting more depression. But when we understand the mind and understanding depression, for some people can have a chemical imbalance that the chemical makeup of the brain has been changed or altered or impacted, that it results in them having symptoms of depression.
yeah,
But with depression, as we think about it, I also want to make people aware that sometimes it's genetic, that sometimes depression may run through families. And so being able to see that if it is a biochemical change in the brain, the
yeah,
challenge with that is that it's not something you can fight by yourself. It's just not something you can fight by yourself. You may need extra support to really help to balance and bring balance to the brain. But definitely, depression is impacted by our brain. And on the other side of that, our thoughts and the way we think can cause us to feel depressed.
yeah,
It can impact the mood of us. So the mind and the body are connected, and a lot of the times we are out of touch with the connection. So how we think can
yeah,
impact our
yeah.
bodies. All of these things could definitely impact a person and their overall mood.
So let's shift it a little bit. Let's talk about how do you get over fear? Because I know a lot of people, in terms of their, want to accomplish things, want to even get over what we're talking about, depression. But some people scared to get out of
Yes.
that, funk. To step out on, making risk, or how does our brain affect us in terms of fear and us moving forward and progressing?
Oh, I love it. Another one of my favorite topics is fear. Let me say this that fear is a normal adaptive function of the brain. And I, in my mind, just believe God just outdid himself when he made the brain.
Yeah.
Because what happens is fear is an adaptive and normal function. That means if a bear were to walk up on you right now, you're going to do one of three things. You're going to fight or you're going to flight. Or
Right.
I'm going to be in the flight crowd, okay? But if you did not have that normal adaptive response, there would be no human race. We would all be gone. So the idea is that fear was really intended to help us to stay safe and to stay alive.
Mm.
So, with that in mind, we also have to be aware that fear can be very paralyzing. And this is where people end up saying, Natalie, I can't do something. I'm so afraid.
Yeah, yeah,
And the idea we think that fear will go away, and it won't. We don't want it to go away because remember what I said, it has an adaptive function to it. If you didn't, you would walk out in front of a car and it'll be
yeah.
the end, right?
Right.
So it keeps you alive in that sense. So we don't get rid of it. What we learn to do though is to live with it, how to manage it, how to have it and still move forward. And a
Yeah,
lot of what we don't do is we don't befriend your fear. So I know someone's probably thinking, I'm supposed to be friends with my fear? You've got to be kidding me. You do.
yeah,
It's like this, it's like a relationship. And when you build a relationship with something or someone, you start to understand them better, right? Everybody has that friend that you go, that's just my friend. Y'all, she's good. Sometimes she crazy, but that's my girl, right?
right, right, right,
You have a relationship with her. You understand her or you understand him.
right.
And with fear, a lot of the times we don't engage in that type of relationship to understand it, to understand when it comes up, why is it showing up?
Yeah,
Fear shows up to protect you. Then you ask, what is it trying to protect me from? And so for me, I can share, I didn't want to put myself out there. I had this fear, so I wanted to stay in the back. And in that, there was a fear of putting myself out there and being judged or
yeah,
being rejected. And so I had to learn, what is my fear trying to protect me from? And then here's the powerful part. Then you get the opportunity to say, you don't have to protect me that way. I got it. I can take care of this. In the event that someone judges me, I can take care of that. I can move through that. And when you do that, you turn the volume down on your fear.
yeah. That's great. That's great. So, in terms of what are practical ways for a person to turn that volume down or build that relationship between themselves and fears within them? Because I know that a lot of people do have those insecurities about
Mhm.
stepping out or moving forward.
Absolutely. First thing is to recognize it, right? This is fear. Second step is to realize it's trying to protect you. Then after that, I want you to call it out. Like, I know now that one of my fears, I call her never good enough. And I realize never good enough is showing up. That's one of the, and I call it out. You know what? This is never good enough. I
Yeah,
get it, right? And she's coming up to protect me. And that's how I recognize that. Then here's the thing that I love. A practical step is that you always have the ability to choose what voice you follow. You always have the ability to choose. And so I can choose in that moment to allow her, right? And I give them, when I
yeah,
think about fears, I personify it because then it's something outside of me, right? It's a part of me, but it's not all of me.
right.
So if I separate that from who I truly am, my core self, then it's not so overwhelming and it's not so scary.
Yeah,
And then when I do that, I realize that she's trying to protect me. And if I can do that, then I can choose to say, I get to choose what voice I follow. And I
yeah,
confront the fear, which is the most powerful thing you can do.
yeah, yeah. No, that's good. That's good. So, with all these different things like fear, that's built up within us and us trying to get over it, and then depression or those kind of aspects. Are people's feelings validated, um,
Mhm.
um, or should we just get over it, just look past them? How do we deal with that?
Great question, right? Because there's so many thoughts on it. I will say that your feelings are your feelings.
Right.
And so they're valid. They're your experience of something. And sometimes we do invalidate. I have to be mindful, even with children. We talked about that earlier, where I may say to them, oh, that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, for them, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or even saying to them, you're not hungry.
Yeah.
For them, it is real, it is their experience. And so I say that to say that, yes, our feelings are valid. Now, here's the other piece of that, that thoughts and feelings are just thoughts and feelings. A lot of the times, what we end up doing is we hold on to them, or we try to get rid of them, or we try to avoid them. And that's what leads us into having discomfort. But the idea is that they're just thoughts, they're just feelings. And if we embrace it that way, we validate that we're experiencing it, but then we realize we don't have to hold on to it. We don't have to do anything with it. It then helps us to really learn how to manage them. And so that's the other piece that many of us just have trouble with our feelings, is managing them. What do I
Yeah.
do?
So I also want to ask: does mental health or anything like that play a role in some of these feelings or thoughts? Or I know we get a lot of questions of mental health in terms of people is being diagnosed more now.
Mhm.
It seems like it's just coming out the woodwork. So does that play a role in any of this in terms of the mind?
It can. For the sake of clarity, mental health is something we all have.
Yeah.
Mental health is your state of being and you being able to cope with normal stressors, you being able to make decisions, being able to contribute to the world, and kind of just knowing kind of who you are. That's mental health for us all. So the truth is, we all have it. We all have mental health.
Right.
When we look at mental illness, which is what I think you're asking, is does the mind play a part in that? And there are ways that it does. Remember, I talked about biochemical changes in the brain, but you also have life experiences that could impact someone's mental health, environmental things. You could have a life situation. Those things could impact a person's mental health and create situations of mental illness. But the way we think could impact our mental health, because mental health is comprised of how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. So absolutely. You also mentioned about there's a lot more increase in mental health. And I think that has to do not so much with more people are having mental health issues as much as there's more awareness around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when we were growing up and generations before that, there was no talk of mental health.
Yeah.
And those individuals who had trouble were isolated. They were ostracized from society. And now we have a culture that's more accepting of mental health. And the numbers are alarming. There are 40 million Americans in the US each year that have a mental illness or mental health condition. 40
Wow.
million. So we're
Wow.
talking about a lot of people.
Yeah. 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 No, that's good to know. That's good to know. So, in all this that we're talking about, how does God play a role in terms of our mind, our thoughts, and controlling them?
Yes, I love it. I love it. I think definitely a big role in that. And the Bible tells us to renew your mind, right? To
Yeah.
be renewed in your mind. And that's something that I believe is a daily thing. For every negative thing that we hear, it takes 7 positive things to counteract that negative. So the importance of when the Bible talks about renewing your mind, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. This idea that we have to think beyond what we're thinking,
Right.
um, to get to another level in our minds to be able to master life. Definitely, a lot of this journey is breaking through all that mental stuff.
Yeah.
So God plays an important role in that. Spending time with God is so important. And this is Pastor Leroy. I had to learn this, that at the time I was doing a lot of prayer, but I was doing a lot of talking. And I
Yeah.
don't know if anybody relates to being with someone on the phone and they're doing a lot of talking and you can't say nothing. It's not
Blah
a
blah blah blah.
good feeling. So
Yeah.
God taught me something very vital. And at the time, I didn't know this is what he was doing. But I was waking up for 5 a.m. prayer, which was the first problem. I was waking up at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and I was at a point where God said to me, he didn't want me to say anything in prayer. So now you imagine it's 5 a.m. in the morning, and for 45 minutes, I could not speak or think. Now, this is how I think how God shows up in this. And so I had to learn how to bring every thought into captivity. And that's what the Bible tells us to do. Where every time, and you can imagine what thoughts I'm having. It's 5 a.m. I'm thinking, why do I have
Yeah,
to be awake? It's
right.
cold on this floor. What am I going to eat? What am I going to do today? Can I get
Yeah.
back into the bed? All of that. And I learned one of the most powerful things that you can do to master your mind and your thinking, which was silence. And there is a peace that comes in that space that I can't even tell you how
Yeah.
it felt. But to quiet those thoughts. And I didn't know God was teaching me that. I just thought it was cruel. It was just cruel.
Yeah.
Like, why do I have to do this, God?
Look,
But
mine is 3 a.m. So
ooh,
man, I'd be like, God, I want to go back to bed. But I understand what you're saying. It's something about that peace.
yes.
Yeah.
It is a place
Yeah.
that when we think about the mind and quieting it, that you find God in that space. And it sharpened my ear to hear. And so I wouldn't trade it for the world. And so when we think about what you asked, it's where's God in that? God is in that space of silence. And we have to learn how to quiet our minds. Now,
Yeah.
most people will find that that is very, very difficult,
Difficult. Yeah.
very difficult. And the mind is just trained to just keep going and figuring out stuff. So, with practice, I will offer those who are listening with practice, start with a few moments. He gave me 45. You might not do 45, but start with something small, even if it's just 60 seconds of you quieting your mind. A lot of the times, Pastor Leroy, though, people are afraid of that because when we do try to get quiet, the stuff in our head gets really loud. And that can be a challenge, but practice and practice, and you will find a peace that surpasses all understanding.
Let me ask you, in terms of in that quiet space, how do you make sure that you're focusing on God, like truly focusing on Him, and taking away the distractions of everything else that's trying to come in your mind?
It's a challenge. And what I would do every time I would have a thought, I
Hmm.
would bring it back down and I would bring it back down and I would and so it became, I wasn't focused on anything,
Yeah.
not even God. There was no thoughts. There were no thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's that space, that peace, that silence that the
Yeah.
scripture talks about. It's not in the fire, it was not in the wind, it was in that stillness. That's where it
Yeah.
was. It wasn't even thinking about God. I was thinking about nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. So, give us some of the things that Natalie does in order to keep her mind focused, keep her mind straight. Whether that's family, work, in terms of progressing your life, business ventures, and how do you do it?
Oh, good question. I will say it has shifted with COVID and all the changes that happened. But one of the things I do is I have to make sure I'm listening to something that's inspirational or motivational. Because again, those old cycles of thoughts they can creep in. They can be very, very subtle.
Can you
So
stop right here though? Can you really get into that and really before you move forward and talk about how we allow things into our system or our mind and how they kind of affect us negative or positive, whether that's music, television, and how our brain impacts makes an imprint of those things.
absolutely, absolutely. I can share. So here's a practical thing to you remember. Your eyes and your ears are the closest things to your brain, right? And so you are taking in everything through those two senses all day long. And a
Yeah.
lot of times people will say that doesn't affect me. I can take it in. No, you can't. You can't.
Right.
The mind stores all of that stuff. It stores all that stuff and it waits, unfortunately, for an opportunity for something to happen. And then it pulls it all out. It pulls it all out. And so those are the two closest things to your brain. You have to guard them and understanding that it is impacting you. And again, when I said it was very subtle, so one day you might hear, there's a certain percentage of people who won't be able to accomplish something. You heard that, right? It came in. And then you start moving forward and trying to do something, and you have a challenge, which the truth is you'll have multiple.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that challenge, then you'll remember, the brain remembers that thing it heard and goes, well, you might start to think, well, maybe I can't do it.
yeah.
And then something else happens, right? Because the brain will look for evidence. Once it has a belief, it looks for evidence, right? And
Right.
then you'll see that, you know what, I can't get the money for the loan. So then maybe that means I'm not supposed to do it. And the mind stores it in as evidence, right? And
Yeah.
so that's how it can be very, very subtle, very, very subtle, until those moments where I call it, it's like those jabs coming at you that it's like, bam, you feel it.
Right,
You
right,
know,
right,
that's the point that we realize, whoa, what just happened?
right, right.
And so it can be very, very subtle, very subtle.
Yeah, because I was telling my son the other day because we was on the way at school and he put his headphones in. I heard him listening to something. I'm like, "What you listening to?" Like,
Mhm.
so he told me, and I was like, "Son, you got to be careful what you're listening to, especially in the morning, because that sets the path of your day, like
Mhm.
your mental capacity, what you're gonna do, and your behavior. Um,
Absolutely.
so you got to be careful of that, and I think our listeners also need to understand, even with your children, it's in this world we live in now. All they do, they put their headphones on, or they on these video games all day from the time they get up to the time they go to bed, and
Absolutely.
how that affects their thought process, their brain, and what their future could be like. So I
As
was want to just add to that.
like you said, you're taking it all in. You're
Yeah,
taking it all in. The first 20 minutes of your day is what sets the tone. Be mindful of how you spend the first 20 minutes. But I'm
yeah,
also going to tell you another time of day that's vital is how you end your day.
yeah,
Because how you end your day will carry you into that next day. People ask, Natalie, how do I wake up excited and motivated and doing all these things?
yeah,
It's how you ended the day.
yeah, yeah,
And creating a ritual. For some people, I encourage them that you say, I release all negative
yeah,
intentions,
yeah,
thoughts, and emotions. I release them before you go to bed. Because that stuff, and many of us can attest to that, when you woke up with that thing that was on your mind the night before, you woke up with it. Right? And you're like, I couldn't shake that thing. It was with me the next day. You carried it over. So, two vital, important parts of our day is how we started and how we ended. But so important to realize what goes in.
So do you think we should start our day with decrees or and end them, or making sure that we are kind of pushing that positive thoughts before we go to bed and when we wake up?
There is a lot of research that supports definitely having those positive affirmations, those
Yeah,
scriptures, those quotes, whatever those things are that really set the tone of how you're going to think that day. And at night as well, it's very important to remind yourself. Here's the thing: as humans, we forget what we need to remember, and we remember what we need to forget. And so
wow.
it seems really simple, right? Like I should know this, but a
Yeah,
lot of the stuff we just forget. We forget. And because we're so bombarded with so many things each day, it can be very helpful and beneficial to just continue to feed your spirit, to feed it.
yeah, that's good. I'm a true believer in the scripture affirmations. Making sure that we fill out ourselves, with all the positive and energy and that God wants us to have. He's given us this mind for a reason to use it in the proper way.
Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
proper way. So, in terms of just tying everything together, I interrupted you in terms of do you do in order to make sure that your brain.
Yes, yes, you did. So, what did I say? Oh, I forgot what I was ending, but what I was offering was those affirmations,
Yeah,
those positive things, putting them in. So, I listen to inspirational, motivational talks in the morning to really just remind myself of who I am and what I can do. But that could come through music as well. I love, love, love music. So, doing that. But another thing that's really practical, simple is movement. Movement. It is harder to hit a moving target. So
yeah,
getting in motion, whether that's walking, that's
yeah,
exercising for me. Sometimes it's just moving around, dancing. I'm a dancer. I love music. So dancing, all of that creates a emotion. It creates an experience for us, and so I do that. I'm an audio book reader, so I'm listening to audio
Yeah.
books a lot of the times because it just makes it easier with three kids.
Yeah.
But being able to listen and get my books in, I try to read at least 1 to 2 books a week, just to
Yeah.
hear new information, to kind of take my way of thinking to another level. Um, what else do I do? I talk. I find those spaces to get out what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. I mean, I used to write. I don't have as much time as I used to, but I am an avid journaler. I love writing, and God speaks to me and through me through it, and so it's also a gift. So those are the things that I get to do to help me.
No, that's good. That's real good. So we almost gonna wrap it up now in terms of the show, but this has been real great information. Is there anything you want to express to the audience before we leave in terms of our mind and taking control and taking ourselves to the next level?
Absolutely. I will say that shifting your mind and really being aware of it is one step at a time. Um, and it's something that you never really fully master. You're always working on it. I
Yeah,
know sometimes people think I've gotten to a certain level, I'm good. That is not true. That you're always continuing to work on it and be aware of it because you're always changing and evolving. The other thing is sometimes people will say to me, Natalie, I don't have time to do it. And I'll tell you, you can't afford not to do it.
yeah,
It is impacting every area of your life. You cannot
yeah.
afford to do it. You have to spend the time. And if you're saying, you know what, my mind is a mess, I want you. That is most of us.
Right, right.
In the same boat that you are. So don't feel bad about it, but just really spend the time to get to know more about your mind. And know that I think it's one of the most amazing things that God gave us. We're the only species that has such a complex mind. And so using it for your good to really support you to move into your next level is something that you can do.
Good. So is there a way that people can get in contact with you if they want to get in contact with you or
Sure, sure. I am on social media platforms as Natalie Warren. So my
y'all make
name.
sure y'all follow her. Y'all follow her.
Yeah, it's with an O. Happy to definitely reach out. And then you can go to my website, which is nataliewarren.com, to see other things that I do. And I host events and I enjoy those. So definitely we want to stay connected with everyone.
Yeah. So we definitely gonna have her come back. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us this week for another segment of Stronger and Better. This has been a great conversation about the mind and just dealing with, getting rid of that positive and dealing with it and making sure that we're putting all this positivity into our lives and making sure that we're being led by God in terms of our destiny and using our mind to our advantage and not letting it be a stepping stone, but allowing us to advance with our mind and taking control. So I just want to thank y'all. I just want to thank you for coming on the show once again. And like I said, we're gonna definitely have you back, and we're gonna have more conversations about dealing with the mind. So y'all have a blessed week. We'll be back next week for another segment of Stronger and Better. And y'all, please make sure that y'all go to the YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button and follow us on YouTube. And I'll see you next week. Love you guys. Thank you.